Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Inside the Club. I'm Belle Fraser, your host and Utah Hockey Club beat reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune, and I'm joined by another special guest, Matt McConnell, who is the voice of Utah Hockey Club and is in his 29th season as an NHL broadcaster. Matt, thank you so much for joining us this week. How are you doing?
This is awesome, Belle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Like I said, 29 years in the NHL, 13, I believe, between the Arizona Coyotes and the Utah Hockey Club. So you have depth of experience with this team. But going back to the very start, how did you get into broadcasting, play-by-play? Kind of where did that passion stem from?
I'll tell you how it happened. I failed math and science as a freshman in college. That's how it happened. I was when I went to college, I was a finance major, and I get up there, proud Spartan, by the way, go green, and I couldn't handle the math. Like I failed my math class, I failed my science class, and I got a B in English. And I came home, and my mom and dad looked at my report card, and I looked at it, and in the lower left corner it said my grade point average was a 0.75. And so I got thrown on academic probation, and I knew it wasn't going to be a finance degree because I couldn't get through the math and the science, and they still kid me on the air about how bad my math is, it was Christmas time, right? And so I'm home, and I had an uncle that was a sports editor for a daily paper outside of Chicago, and he covered Notre Dame for years, and I always thought his job was pretty cool. And he asked me, he said, how did it go? And I said, well, Uncle John, it didn't go too well. I failed 2 of my 3 classes. And I said, that I don't think finance is for me. And I remember, I've always thought about what you've done and your career. And I always kind of in the back of my mind said, what would it be like to, be a sports writer or, get into sports broadcasting? And I'm seriously thinking about it right now. And he, you're sitting there, he had one of those like highball glasses. It's, the holidays. So he's drinking his scotch or whatever. And he takes a big old swig of his scotch and he says, he goes, well, you know what, kid, you don't want to get 25 years down the road and look back and say, what if? And that was my moment, Belle. I'm like, okay. I went back to school. My degree's in telecommunication, which requires no math, no science. And that's kind of how it began. Just, got involved with campus radio, did a bunch of Michigan State hockey games. My first broadcast ever, I think, was in 37-degree weather for a Michigan State, I want to say it was Grand Valley State baseball game where I think I got to call the middle 3 innings or something. And we were in this trailer behind home plate, and but it's, I wonder if it's the same like with you with sports writing, right? It's kind of a drug. You do it once or twice and you want to keep doing it. And that's kind of how it all began for me. I was in the minors for a while and got out of it for a while and then came back. But, it's like comedians, right? They say you get up on stage and you do improv once and you want to get right back up and do it again. So that's kind of the basic beginnings, I guess, for me.
That's a great story. The math part is funny because I feel like a lot of us who graduated with a communications degree did it because you were passionate about sports something, but it was a perk where you didn't have to take math. So yeah, clearly your conversation with your uncle came in your college career. Were you a sports fan growing up and kind of weren't thinking that it could be a career? How were you kind of connected to sports before you got into broadcasting?
Yeah, I don't think I really thought it could be a career because I didn't think it was realistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very competitive business. I think I knew that early on. There certainly aren't as many jobs as say if you were to get a business degree and you go on campus and you go to placement services and interview. But I've loved sports from the beginning. I remember when I was really little, and this is one of my few recollections of I'm talking, I must have been like 4, maybe
Right.
5. I walked down into the basement and my dad's watching a game and we were, I grew up, at the beginning in Northwest Indiana. And I'm like, Dad, what are you watching? And he said, I'm watching the Blackhawks. And, my dad was a Chicago sports guy through and through. He loved the Cubs, loved the Blackhawks. Didn't really care for the Bulls. He didn't follow the NBA all that much. But so I sat down and I started watching it with him. And it was, I want to say it was in black and white because, I mean, I'm not in my 30s anymore, Belle. I know that may come as a surprise to you. But yeah, I just sat there and I thought it was cool, all this movement and this action on the screen. And I think within a month, he took me to a game, and that sold me. Like old Chicago Stadium, the place is crazy. I asked for I think a year later, I started listening to the broadcasters on the air. I listened to Dan Kelly on KMOX do Blues games, and I became a Blues fan for a while. Got a Blues jersey for Christmas. The next progression was skating with my sisters, and I remember skating in these on these ponds in Northwest Indiana, this swamp that would fill up in the wintertime. We'd go out there and skate, and I had my sister's white figure skates on, and and so 3 days later, I had a stick in my hand, right? So it was that's kind of how I got interested in it. I've always been a big sports fan. I love them all, and I've even started watching Premier League a little bit, which is weird. I never thought I'd do that, but yeah, I like them all.
Pretty full circle that Utah's first game was against Chicago and its captain is from St. Louis. Kind of
That's true. Yeah.
nice to you.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of the broadcasters you listened to as a kid, but I was just wondering when you were going through that learning curve when you first got into it, what were the biggest lessons you learned and maybe people you looked up to or listened to help perfect or form your craft?
Yeah, I think I was like every little kid that wanted to be a broadcaster. I had my tape recorder and I'd mimic them into the tape recorder and listen to it back. The three for me, and now we're going back, okay? We're going back a ways here. But Dan Kelly had an incredible, authoritative, booming, strong voice when he called the Blues games, and it was so distinct. And if you listen to his son John call Blues games, you can hear similarities. I think John does a really good job in St. Louis today. He was one of them. There was another guy, Lloyd Pettit, who was the longtime radio voice of the Blackhawks before Pat Foley got there, right? And Lloyd was a guy. I would listen to him in my bed. I'd sneak my radio in, and close my door so my mom and dad thought I was sleeping, like every kid does, right? And I could close my eyes laying in bed and know exactly where the puck was. He was amazing in his detail, and I actually had a chance to meet him. He and his wife own the Milwaukee Admirals, and so my first year in minor pro, we went in there, and he was actually sitting in the stands, and like a 22-year-old naive kid, I'm like, "Hey, Mr. Pettit, will you listen to my stuff?"
Mm-hmm.
And so he had the big old tape recorder on his ear, and he listened for like 5 minutes and told me to stick with it, which was boom, right?
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was like one of the best moments of my life. And the other guy was Mike Lang. Mike Lang was I had a chance to work with Mike when I was in Pittsburgh. Mike did TV. I was on the radio side. Mike taught me, rest in peace. Mike just passing away recently. But Mike taught me a lot about broadcasting, but he taught me a lot about how to fit in and get along and be a good person. And he always just said, be good to people and smile. And so he taught me a lot of the life lessons working with him. But yeah, those were the three voices. And I tell the broadcasters now, in terms of getting better in this business, just try to, you're not going to be Doc Emmerich overnight, and you're not going to be Chris Cuthbert, and you're not going to be Kenny Albert overnight. Just worry about getting better in one area at a time and build your base. And when I was in Arizona, I taught a play-by-play class at ASU at the Cronkite School, and it was interesting to watch how the kids made progression by just, instead of taking it all on at once, just worry about one area at a time. And that's the advice I'd give young broadcasters.
I love that. Well, you clearly did that. Like you said, ended up in Arizona eventually,
Yeah.
and then ended up in Salt Lake City. You made the move with the team. What went into that decision making for you? Were you kind of like, okay, I'm all in, let's do this? And you kind of experienced this whole transition tangentially to this organization. What was that like?
Well, I got a little bit of a taste of it when I came up and I emceed the event in April, the
Hmm.
Meet the Team event, which was amazing. It was a highlight of my career. I thought it was really important. First of all, the way Arizona ended it, I feel really bad for a lot of people that couldn't continue their careers, right? And it was a tough situation. It really was. But I think coming to Utah in April to MC the event gave me an opportunity to meet people and to kind of get an idea of what the organization was all about. And Belle, I go back to the press conference that Ryan and Ashley Smith had with Gary Bettman, and I remember there was one part of it where Ryan said, "We're going to need everybody. This isn't just the team getting this done. We're going to need all of Utah in this venture with us." And he said something along the lines of, We got 75 families moving here. We're gonna need real estate agents. We're going to need daycare. We're going to need houses. We're going to need all this, and we got to all do it together." And it seemed like he was saying, "All right, everybody, come on, let's go, let's do this," right? And this is no joke. I stopped it, and my wife was working in her office in the house, and I said, "Hey, you got to come out and hear this." And I backed it up and I played it to her, and she just turned to me and she said, "Wow." So I knew the culture was going to be great, and it hasn't disappointed. They talk about being all in, and that's true. And I think the culture on the hockey side has been terrific with Chris Armstrong. He's a guy that empowers you. He's positive. He makes you enjoy what you do. He's just created a real positive atmosphere, and the team too. You think about, okay, I've been with a lot of these guys for a long time. I want to see it through, right?
Of course, yeah.
So it's just been a great transition. The people here are genuinely kind. I'm sure you found that out too, Belle, coming in. I know everybody says that, right? But they're genuinely kind, and I'm surprised by the food culture here. The food's unbelievable. I think it is, and
Yeah.
just the mom and pop coffee shops and all that, and it's easy to get around, and it's a pretty mild climate too for I guess being considered having a winter climate. So I'm all in, and I'm excited, and hopefully they can get to the postseason. We can have some fun there too.
Yeah. Well, the fans got lucky that you made that decision because, I mean, you've been such a huge part of educating people about not just
Appreciate
this
that.
year of this team, but, the
Thank you.
history of it.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you broadcasted for the Ducks in 1993 and the
yeah,
Thrashers in 1999, were those their inaugural seasons as well?
they were.
Okay, so that's kind of a crazy
Yeah.
stat for your career. How does broadcasting an inaugural season of a team kind of change your job or your mindset when you are kind of teaching and introducing a brand new NHL audience to the sport, to the players? Is it different than when you're in year 10 in Arizona?
Yeah, I think so. Anaheim was obviously brand new. It was kind of the NHL's major push into the Sun Belt at the time.
Hmm.
The team was owned by the Walt Disney Corporation, and they did a great job there. Paul Kariya and Teemu Selanne were game changers for that franchise, obviously, and both numbers now hanging in the rafters in Anaheim. Atlanta was a lot of fun. Atlanta was cool. We were all Turner Sports employees, and we had a lot of fun with that. And it was a little bit different. It was in the South. You competed with Georgia football, which had been around for 100 years, and now this one. I've had experience in that. And you're right. You're introducing a whole new product, all new personalities. You've gone through it, Belle. And by the way, you've done a great job telling the stories of all of these great athletes, and not only the athletes but the organization. And so I think it's kind of fun. I think it's kind of fun to have a blank slate. And they've just everybody they've they've welcomed me. They've, open arms. It's just been a lot of fun. But I think there's a little bit more of a teaching mechanism there, and I think we've done a really good job, especially on the studio side of doing that, and pregame show, and Dom and Kim and Sarah and Nick, they've really been involved in that. Tyson as well. So I think there is it a hockey 101? Is it a hockey 201? It's kind of hard to say because Salt Lake's had hockey for a long time. In fact, I'm so old I remember calling Theo Fleury's pro debut in the Salt Palace in the playoffs years ago. So it's been around for a long time, and I remember those crowds at the Salt Palace. They were pretty they were pretty passionate, and the crowds were they drew great crowds. So it's probably more of a 201 than a 101, I think.
Got it. And you mentioned emceeing that event back in April when the team first got acquired. When you look at that date to where we are now with around 20 games left in the regular season, what have you thought of, the evolution of this team in Salt Lake City, both on and off the ice, where they've positioned themselves, but also how they are such a big part of this community now?
Yeah, and you know what? That's fun. That's the fun part. You get a real feeling. I mean, this is Utah's team, right? And it's interesting because I almost feel guilty a little bit because I didn't come in until September, right? So all the heavy lifting was already done, and I just kind of come in, and I felt maybe that I could have helped them along the way a little bit over the summer, but it's amazing and remarkable what they were able to accomplish in 5.5 months. To get the Oval up and running for a practice facility, what they did there, everything in terms of the front office and ramping up and hiring really good people, to all of the fan, the requirements of the fan, the tickets, the interaction, the getting up and running, having a preseason game, right? So it's been amazing there. On the ice, I think it's been a lot of fun to watch this roster evolve, right? So, I've been around seeing a lot of these guys come up. I remember when Lawson Krause first started, and Matthias Michelli and Clayton Keller and all of these guys. And I remember the Nick Schmaltz trade. I interviewed him in the locker room in Minnesota when he, before he played his first game. I just think that they're in a really good spot because now a lot of the younger kids are taking over, the leadership duties and the scoring duties and all of that. And other players that have been here for a while, their roles are now starting to evolve, right? And, I think recently Lawson Krause has been unbelievable. He's made plays, but in a different role, right? He scored a goal against Chicago, but but he's done so many other things that have helped the team win. And I think that bodes well for the future because I think that kind of gets to the strength of the entire group as a whole, right? So for me, that's been a lot of fun. And, I can really see where they're heading now and what they have. It's not massive gaping holes anymore. It's just tweaks here and there. So it'll be interesting to see the trade deadline, what happens there.
Yeah.
But I just think overall they're in a pretty good spot right now, and they're healthy. That's huge.
I was going to bring up the trade deadline because, of course, right now the whole buzz is playoff picture, trade deadline, what is Utah going to do? And I imagine compared to last year and conversations in the past in Arizona, the players are coming out right now saying that's the expectation. We believe we can do it. And as we record this, they're 3 points out. So mathematically, if I'm doing this right, they have a pretty good chance if they really make a push. Like you said, you've been around Clayton Keller, veterans in that leadership group for a while. How important is it for him? He's such a competitive guy and hasn't been in a playoff series before. Just what would that mean to the organization, but also the players that stuck around, didn't request a trade, saw this through the rebuild?
Well, I think it's huge. And, and Dominic Moore said on a recent game, he said the players want the pressure. They want to have an opportunity to play in the postseason. And he's 100% right. They've been around for a long time. They train all year for this moment. They take maybe a week or two off at the end of the season, and they're right back doing dry land training. They're getting on the ice again. it used to be way back in the day that training camp was the time you get into shape. Well, it's not that way anymore, right? It's a 12, 11 and a half month maybe business for these guys. So, there's the human side of it where you're really pulling for them to have success. And Andre Tourigny's talked about it. He's like, you got to go through the growing pains, right? You got to experience it to get through it, and they've experienced it.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to get through it, and that's the that's the holy grail, right, Belle? It's getting over that hump, and then being able to stay on top of that and continue along. And the Florida Panthers got to that point. The Carolina Hurricanes have gotten to that point. There have been a lot of teams that have been able to do that. But I feel good about the roster right now. I don't know what they're going to do at the deadline. In the past it's been pretty active, but I think they're pretty happy with what they've got. Maybe they tweak, maybe they tweak something here and there. Maybe they add a little bit of depth.
Yeah.
I think they could use some depth maybe based on what we've seen with guys out. So it's always fascinating, and we'll see what Bill and Chris have up their sleeve.
I agree with you on the depth part. It was funny. I was talking to Ian Cole yesterday, and he's made playoffs for the last 14 years. The only time he's missed playoffs was his rookie season and the 2010-11 year. And I was asking about the deadline. He was like, I've honestly never been in a situation where the GM of my team was looking to sell. And he was saying, like, the mindset he's always had for the last 20 games of the season is push, push, push. He's never been like, all right, like, I guess we'll just try our hardest, even though our GM sold half the team. So I think having players like that in there too, who is like, there's no other way he knows the NHL than to make this final stretch matter. So we talk about acquisitions that happened before the trade deadline. I think that's a huge part. Bill has talked about, like, I've already done some shopping with Olympiade and Stenlin and Sergachev and people going in this summer. So I think those have been important pieces as well. You mentioned Dominic Moore. He's one of your new broadcast partners, and then Nick Olczyk also hops in there too. What's it been like finding chemistry with two new people and figuring out, what your voice is together and representing this team on air?
It's been fun. I've never been part of a 3-man booth, which is, what we have at home. And it was, it took me a little bit of time just getting used to that. Dominic Moore teaches me something every single day, whether we're sitting out at the Oval and I throw a crazy theory or concept by him and he just looks at me like I've got 5 eyes and like, what's going on here? And but he teaches me something every single day because he's really, really smart. And it's kind of interesting to pair a state school guy with a Harvard guy, but that's a whole nother story.
So both ended up in the same place. Look at that.
That's right. Geez, what's going on with you then, Dom? Come on. And he had a great career, and he understands the game, and he's done the work as an analyst now for at the national level for a while. So Nick Olczyk's a rising star. Nick will someday be a number one, in the booth. It's unbelievable when you listen to him and you think about his dad. They sound very similar, but Nick is unbelievable in terms of his preparation. He works tirelessly to make sure that he's got all his bases covered. And we've got a great group. Sarah Merrifield, I remember Sarah's a tremendous reporter, and I remember in preseason, I think, when we went down to do a game in Vegas, she had probably 5 pages on her computer of ideas for stories throughout the year that we wanted to tackle, and that was all her. She works extremely hard. She's very, very good. She did go to Syracuse, so that's a bit of an issue, but that's okay. We'll forgive her. And the rest of the group, Kim Becker is tremendous. Tyson Nash has done an unbelievable job on the Allcast. So I think we've got a really good group, a really good mix. Our producer, Doug Foster, was my producer for, I believe, 3 seasons in Arizona, and he's really helped me on my pace. And when you do play-by-play, pace is the holy grail as well. It's I tend to race a little bit when I talk, and he's just kind of calmed me down a little bit, and so that's really helped. But we've got a wonderful group, and Travis Henderson and Craig Amazine, at the top, they've been they've been very supportive. And here in Utah, it's broadcast people making broadcast decisions. So that is huge in our business in this day and age. Yeah.
And it shows. I mean,
I appreciate that.
I watch when I'm not on the road, and I'm learning new things from you guys every night as well.
Oh, you're learning from Dom and Nick. They're the ones teaching you.
Well, like you said, kind of an adjustment for the broadcast, but for the players as well. For you, who's watched this team through many iterations, are there any guys that kind of stood out to you this season that maybe you didn't expect to make a jump or take this move and make the most out of it like they have?
Ole Mata for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about Ole. Obviously, he was a high pick, and spent time in L.A. and Pittsburgh, and bounced around a little bit. Ole Mata, I think, has been a huge key to this whole season because when Sean Durzi went down, the back end was a little bit unstable, and they struggled to find their footing, and Ole just kind of came in and settled everything down.
Yep.
He chips in occasionally on the offensive side with nice setups and things, but his job is just to shut down puck carriers and things like that, and he's done a great job. Logan Cooley to me is so much fun to watch. I don't think he's tapped hardly any of his potential yet, and that's kind of scary. Dylan Guenther is a tremendous player, and what I like about Dylan is he is as down to earth and nice of a human being as anybody I've seen.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good people in that locker room. You mentioned Ian Cole; he's one of them. Nick Bukestad is just a great human. Lawson Krause as well. Connor Ingram. They're all just really good people. But I think Ole Mata on the back end has played a huge role, and I think it's a little bit of by committee up top. They've got a pretty good top six now. But again, it's guys learning and knowing their roles to fit within the team, and I think that's been very evident over the last few weeks here as they go down the stretch.
It's funny with Mata. I remember when they acquired him late October, we were like, oh, it's great because he's on an expiring deal. This was so smart of Bill. He can be a rental for the rest of the season, and if it works out cap wise because they're not tied to him. And he's kind of, I was talking about this with Craig Morgan last week, played his way into a contract extension if he wants one.
Right.
It seems like it's no longer they're for sure going to say goodbye to Mata after this season. And he was just filling in the gap because he's on the second pair with Sean Durzi right now. Marino came back, Durzi came back, Sergachev is healthy, and he's still a top four defenseman. So it is really interesting how he kind of forced their hand there.
Yeah, and he has been he's been an unsung hero for me. The other guy too is Barrett Hayton. Mm-hmm. For a long time, Andre Tourigny's been telling us how great he is at doing a lot of things very, very well, and he's right. He stands in front of the net, he mucks it up, he's really good defensively, he scores goals. I think he has elevated his game as well. So there's so many good stories. I don't know who the MVP of this team is. I mean, Dylan Guenther, is it Clayton Keller? Karel Vejmelka.
Yeah,
is elevated. It's a fun conversation to have, right? So I think they're in a good spot. Maybe a little more depth, right? But overall, I think they're pretty happy with what they've got right now.
Yeah, no, totally. When you talk about depth, the last two games, we're recording this after the win over the Blackhawks, but they've been 2-1 games, and it's great they won, but you would like the breathing room of a little scoring depth to maybe make it 4-1. But, like the players and coach said, a win is a win at this time of the season. So
they could shoot the puck a little more on the power play, okay?
Yeah,
I'll say that.
On the power play, we could.
Let's get some shots going here. They had how many shots did they have in the Chicago game? 26, maybe?
I know they outchanced them 90 to 30 something.
It was at one point the shot attempts were 93, and that line of with Lawson Krause and they out attempted Chicago 21-1, I think, in just under 8 minutes of ice, time on ice, which is incredibly efficient.
Yeah, I think that's been sometimes the theme is where the underlying numbers look really good for this team, even in losses. And that's hard to swallow as fans and players sometimes, where it feels like you're doing what you need to do to win, but the scoreboard ultimately determines the game, but that's all
Yep.
part of the growth. And I think Trini's very good at highlighting that even if we lost, it doesn't mean we took a step back. So
I think coaches love the 2-1 games. Like, broadcasters like the 6-5 games.
Yeah, so do we.
Yeah. Unless you're on deadline, right?
Right. 3 quick hitters for you before we wrap this up. But what was the best game you called this season?
Oh, wow. I think it's the Philly game, right? I think it's the Philly game at Delta Center. The 0.8 seconds to go, the winner. That was amazing. I think some of the early games were fun. Just to get off to the quick start. The game at Madison Square Garden and your neck of the woods, but I think the Philly game was probably the highlight. Yeah.
I remember like it was slow motion watching him go up, and it was like, there's no way he's gonna do it. And we were all like, thank God, because they had gone to overtime like 5 of the last 6 games. We were like, we cannot do this again.
Well, when you're calling the game as a play-by-play guy, you're watching the puck carrier, and you don't typically see a lot of stuff. And right away, Dom, mentioned the fact that Keller was able to get off so the play would be onside. I didn't even see that until I watched the replay. It shows you how good Dom is, and yeah, that was unbelievable. Unbelievable how, how he has done it this year in clutch moments. Yeah.
Then Gunther followed it up the next game with another overtime winner.
That's right.
which was almost laughable. And just road cities, road arenas, you've been to all of them, I assume by now. What's been your favorite? What's circled on your calendar when this team is traveling?
I'm gonna be honest here. Mullet Arena wasn't bad. 13 rows off the ice. And Delta Center's good. Where we're at Delta Center is very good. I would say, the Canadian cities are pretty cool. Montreal's fun. You're in a gondola. Vancouver's pretty cool. I think from a play-by-play guy standpoint, you want to be kind of out towards the ice and high up, right? So, those arenas provide that. And, and the cities are awesome. Detroit, we're going to Detroit here soon, and their gondola is way up high, and you kind of look straight down on the ice. So that's kind of what I look for. Calgary's pretty good. Calgary's kind of old school, but you're high and over the ice, and that's what I look for. Yeah, and a big old pot of coffee somewhere within walking distance that I can go to.
That Detroit game, that road game back to back on the trade deadline. I can't imagine the energy around that one when you go back to Detroit next week.
Yeah, we've had some interesting trade line days. I remember a few back in Arizona where when we start the game, you're constantly wondering, is there going to be a deal right up until game time, right? And so, are you going to have enough time to talk about it and build graphics and all that kind of stuff? So yeah, even the trade deadline for us is always kind of interesting. Yeah,
totally.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah, and I guess the Chicago game is 7, so trade deadline's 3. So yeah, you've got 3.5 hours of notes to write that day.
Oh yeah.
Just to wrap it up, what is the best part of your job, either being in Utah this year or just throughout your entire career?
I think if you don't have the ability, which I didn't have as a player, as a Bantam washout in northern Minnesota, it's just being around it. You know what? Do what you love and love what you do, right? My former partner, Darren Elliott in Atlanta, told me that one time, and it's so true. You think about it, you get out of college and you got 45 years staring you in the face of career stuff, and you want to be happy.
Yeah.
You want to, that's my advice to you, Belle. Chase your passion, right?
Yeah.
And be happy and enjoy what you do. And, when I was out of it for a while, I had a kind of a sales career, and it was okay, but I always had the bug to get back into it, which is obviously what I did. Just being around it, talking to guys, learning about, all the nuances of the game. And we're treated so great. We stay, we travel on beautiful planes. We're in the best hotels. It's amazing, being along for the ride in this league. And I love hockey. I love hockey. I've done basketball, I've done football, I've done baseball, but hockey is my passion. So do what you love and love what you do.
Love that. I'll remember that. I feel like we're all pretty lucky in this Utah group that we get to be part of it and love what we do. It's so fun coming.
And the support of the organization. Sorry to cut you off.
No. But that's a huge part. I mean, I think that's been one of the biggest storylines in Utah this season. It's just the support of
good people, really good people, and I sincerely mean that.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for doing this. I'm sure everyone's going to love this episode, hearing a little bit more about you. Everyone, obviously, you can find Matt on SCG Networks, every Utah Hockey Club game, and then also on Twitter. I love your videos of the booths when you're on the road and stuff. What's your username if people don't already follow that?
It's at Matty, Matty, Utah HC TV, I think that's what it is.
It's a good follow. He has some sneaky good tweets along the way.
I'm glad I could help you. You must have a slow week with your guests here, Belle.
That is not true at all. I told you, you've been requested.
That's frightening and amazing. I'll roll into one.
Selfishly, it's fun for me too, because learning from you and learning more about this team and your background, it's fun for me to hear as.
Well, you are a very good writer, and you cover this team as well as anybody that I've been around in my 29 years. I'm blown away at your talent as a writer at such a young age, and I mean, you're right out of BU. I know you're going to be disappointed when they lose to my Spartans in the tournament, if you get in that. So I figured I'd take one shot at BU.
Right? I mean, they might lose to your Spartans.
Hey, can I show you something real quick?
Michigan in the name, I'm scared of playing.
Can I show you something real quick?
Please.
Okay, I'm gonna walk to my closet here and I'm gonna show you something. Hold on. Right here.
No way.
I bought it. I'm gonna put it on for you.
Did you buy it when you were in Boston when they practiced there?
I bought it at the shop you told me to go to.
Where I told you.
Right there.
I love it.
I love it. Probably take this off.
Oh wait, you know what? 1 second.
I gotta take the little thing off the top here.
I was also just in Boston. There we go.
So this hat is pretty nice. Okay, it's not bad, but
good color. Beanpot champions.
But yeah, it's. I don't know. I just think this hat looks a lot better.
Yeah, they're both good, but that fits you. That fits you well.
All right,
I appreciate you bringing BU into the mix. I love talking about it. But thank you again for coming on. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back next week. Everyone have a great week.